Hey, let's tell them about the park that has a cemetery underneath of it.
Yeah, and the little playground that the kids play right on top.
Well, hello there, parapeeps, and welcome to another episode of Our Haunted Travels. I'm your host, Sean Donnelly.
And I'm your co-host, Marianne Donnelly.
Hey, we are here on location in San Diego at Mission Park. It's also called Pioneer Park. Interesting place here, folks, because it just so happens this park right here actually has a cemetery underneath of it. And I thought, yeah, right, when I was doing the research. But I did some more digging, and yeah, it's confirmed. We'll tell you about that here in a little bit. Let's get some shots.
Mission Hills Park is a park with multiple names. Mission Hills Park, Calvary Pioneer Memorial Park, and simply Pioneer Park. It also has an interesting past, and at that time, it too had several names. It used to be a cemetery, and I guess it technically still is, as most of the bodies were not moved and still sit in their final resting places. But I'll get to that in a few minutes. In fact, it has had several names as a cemetery as well. When it was known as a cemetery, it was officially identified as Calvary Cemetery, which was a Catholic cemetery with graves dating back to the 1870s. But it was also known as the New Catholic Cemetery, as it was used after the old one, El Campo Santo Cemetery, was filled. Then, just simply the Catholic Cemetery during its full use, and eventually it was known as the Old Cemetery after Holy Cross Cemetery opened. Today, it's not identified as a cemetery at all, and it's known, even to some residents of San Diego, as simply a park. There is an internment memorial in the corner of the park for those buried, and is the only indication today that Calvary Cemetery ever existed. So how did it go from being a cemetery to a park, you ask? It all began in 1869 when Joseph S. Manasseh purchased the tract of land for $10 from the city of San Diego at 25 cents an acre. The records indicate that this became official on February 18th of 1896. But not long later, in 1873, it became necessary to find a new burial ground. As it turns out, the land chosen was part of the land sold to Manasseh. The city of San Diego trustees ended up purchasing 10 acres of land back from Manasseh for a sum of $500 on July 7th of 1873. And on October 27th, they portioned off 5 acres of this land to be the Catholic Cemetery for the Immaculate Conception Parish, and 5 acres of it for a Protestant cemetery. Unfortunately, this land ends up being very rocky, and after the first burial in 1875, Father Ubach of the church requested a new location. They went back to Manasseh and exchanged the land that they had previously purchased for a different 10 acres of land between February and March of 1876, making the new land officially the cemetery on March 11th of 1876. The other 5 acres would become Mission Hills Park on April 12th of 1909, as the Protestants ended up not using their portion of the tract of land. In 1919, the church opened a new cemetery called Holy Cross Cemetery, and Calvary begins to be neglected and falls into disrepair. By 1938, it's deemed that the city will sponsor a rehab project for the cemetery and build an adobe wall around it, with the Historical Association of San Diego paying for the materials and the WPA to pay for the labor. Construction on the wall began November 7th of 1938, and the entire project was completed by November 26th of 1939. The completion was culminated with a rededication ceremony and a stone monument. In the 1940s, the U.S. military had an observation base on the cemetery grounds. There was also a caretaker for the cemetery that was employed by the city of San Diego, and, unfortunately, there was vandalism of the graves. In 1957, a bill was approved that allowed for declarations of abandonment for cemeteries. The same bill would allow the land to then be converted to what would be called pioneer parks. The law also provided for the removal of headstones and memorials, and the creation of a central memorial to honor those buried. In 1961, the city looked into doing this, and on March 27th of 1968, the church provided the city with a quitclaim deed to the cemetery grounds. On June 11th of 1968, Calvary Cemetery was declared abandoned. In February of 1969, it was declared that it would become a historical site by the City of San Diego Historical Site Board, and the architectural firm of Paderewski, Dean and Associates was hired by the San Diego City Council to prepare a general development plan for a pioneer park. On July 23rd of 1969, Clemens Granite Works was given permission to remove all unmarked stones. The stones were placed mostly into a ravine in Holy Cross Cemetery. Several important people and decent stones salvaged were eventually turned into the memorial in the park. On February 17th of 1970, T.B. Pennick & Sons, Inc. is granted the contract for converting the cemetery into a pioneer park, and between February and June, rubbings and photographs were made for as many of the monuments and gravestones of Calvary Cemetery as possible. On September 30th of 1971, it was deemed that a portion of the land, named the Catholic Cemetery, would become a public park known as Calvary Pioneer Memorial Park. In 1971, Trepti Brothers Development Company was given the contract to build restroom facilities in Pioneer Park. It was not completed, however, until November of 1977. Also in 1977, bronze plaques containing the names of some of the people who were buried at Calvary Cemetery were designed by John Davidson and were placed in the park. What would be known today as Calvary Pioneer Memorial Park was officially dedicated on December 11th. On February 9th of 1988, the gravestones removed from Calvary Cemetery in 1970 were finally bulldozed over. A few of the gravestones were saved and turned into a small memorial atop the location in Mount Hope Cemetery. Now notice that I did not mention a date for the disinterment of those buried in the cemetery. That's because most weren't. Some of the bodies were reinterred at other cemeteries, if they could be paid for by the remaining family members. The majority of the bodies, however, are still remaining under the grass of today's park. Among those still buried in Calvary Pioneer Memorial Park are Father Antonio D. Ubach, San Diego's first parish priest, and two prominent early San Diegans, Captain Cave Johnson Coots and his wife Isadora Bandini. Captain Coots, by the way, was a member of the same class at West Point as Ulysses S. Grant. Also buried there are deceased from two above-ground vaults that were opened on August 19th of 1969, only to have the caskets reinterred directly below their original tomb. In 2002, a local who spearheaded the creation of Pioneer Park, named Frank Antonicelli, died. Some say Antonicelli was buried in the defunct Calvary Cemetery, but others indicate it's merely a cenotaph or an empty monument to honor him, and his remains are really elsewhere. In any case, a memorial bench in his name can be found in the park today. Also in the park today, you can attend a variety of functions or just stop by and stroll the grounds, or even have a picnic as food is allowed, but no glass containers. There is a children's play area, of course the restrooms, the memorial to the past, or should I say current residents of the park, and a walking trail which you can walk all around the park. On Friday nights in the summer, you can attend one of the summer concert music in the park events, or you can even have a party of your own. or your wedding with a capacity of 750 people. Just no bounce houses. Sorry, but inflatables just aren't allowed.
A park
Yep.
on top of a cemetery.
Yep.
Well, as you notice, we're back here at the
Studio.
because we're changing things up a little bit. We just covered the history of the location while we were on location, but we did it back here. I don't know. You could probably bet there's some paranormal claims at this place.
You might think so.
Yeah. So if you like to hear about them, the video is going to come out on Thursday. Boris is getting to work for a Ghost Stories and Folklore. And then we're going to come back on Friday and tell you our personal experience and theories about this location. So till next time.
Thanks for watching.
And happy hunting. Let us know if you like this video by hitting that thumbs up. Also, if you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, support our channel by hitting that subscribe button and dinging that bell so you get notified the next time there's a video from Panic D Videos.
Thanks for watching.
Happy hunting!